Hello friends, welcome to CEC live lectures on management accounting. Myself Aditya P. Tripathi, and I'm once again here with you to continue our discussion on the topic of batch costing. This is going to be part 2 of our lectures on batch costing, and in today's lecture I have planned it in such a way that I will first be telling you about the very nature and characteristics of batch costing. Then I shall be telling you about the conditions in which we are using batch costing, and eventually we'll come up with some practical problems, numerical problems on batch costing to enhance your understanding of the topic, that how to deal with the practical problem with the some real life examples where you are manufacturing in a batch, and you have to identify that what should be that ideal number, how to identify that what is my profit from this specific batch, and in what quantum we should produce. So this is all my agenda of today's lecture. So I'll first be starting with the very nature and characteristics of batch costing. Remember, my dear learners, that batch costing is being used in all those production processes where the process of production is of repetitive in nature. Wherever you have that the process of any production process, and there you have a repetitive kind of activity, we always recommend that you should go for batch costing. So basically that is a need based characteristics. The need is, if your process is repetitive in nature, you have to follow certain checks and balances, you have to follow step after step, and there comes the role of batch costing. So you can say that it is my need that I am actually having a production process which is of repetitive in nature, and for that I have a solution called batch costing. So the nature of batch costing becomes that only. The second is, there is a functional layout of various manufacturing process, that I am having a functional layout. There is a framework, there is a layout of various manufacturing steps. Step after step there is a layout which is being prescribed to us, and we are actually following those steps. So there comes the role of batch costing, that in place of dealing with each and every unit of product one by one, it's better to go ahead with the process, with the batch, that I'm dealing with say 100 units of a batch, and those 100 units are being treated at the level 1, and by the time it goes to level 2, I'm again having another set of 100 units, another batch of 100 units at level 1. So this is what is the beauty of batch costing, where we are having a functional layout of various manufacturing processes to ensure that no workforce is sitting idle. We are having all the steps to be active, and in that way we are not only saving our time, but we are also ensuring the cost effectiveness in our entire production process. And once the operation is carried out in the entire batch, and then it is processed onto the next process, to ensure that we are having timely completion of our production, and similar type of machine is arranged at one place. So if you are having all these conditions to be fulfilled, or I would say if you are finding all these steps to be there, you can say that we are following basically a specific method of specialized method of costing called batch costing. Now, conditions when we are going to use batch costing is when your products manufactured are identical in nature, when you have identical products, say basically in pharmaceutical industry it is increasingly used, because they have to not only ensure the timely completion of process but also the quality control. So the entire process, the product manufactured, they are identical. So if you are producing in batches, you have to ensure that you are ensuring the quality control also, and the product component is produced in a very large number at a time. We are dealing with, suppose I am manufacturing say medicines, so around say 10,000 pills or 10,000 tablets or capsules at one point of time we are manufacturing, and there comes the role of batch costing. And moreover, where you need to identify or track the control of quality, how to identify, how to trace that to which batch this product belongs to, and there comes the role of batch costing. And of course, if you are doing all this, efficiency in production process is going to be the integral part of it. So with this very background of the nature and characteristics of batch costing and what are those conditions where we use batch costing, I am now going to discuss with you some practical problems, some numerical questions, and shall tell you how to deal with such kind of questions. So let us start with a question. The information is related to the manufacturing of a component. The question reports that cost of material is 6 paisa per component. There is a component which you are going to manufacture, and cost of material for this component is 6 paisa per component. Operator's wages is 72 paisa per hour. So if you have an operator who is working for 1 hour, you are actually paying the wages of 72 paisa per hour. Machine hour rate is rupees 1.50, and setting up time for the machine where you are preparing your machine for functioning, for working, it is 2 hours and 20 minutes. So basically this is the setting up time of the machine, and manufacturing time is 10 minutes per component. So your machine is taking 10 minutes to complete the process of production of this specific component. So you are reported with cost of material, operator's wages, machine hour rate, setting up time, and also the manufacturing time. What they are expecting from you, they are asking you to prepare a cost sheet showing both production and setting up cost, total cost per unit for different batches. If you are producing in batch of 10 components, if you are producing in batch of 100 components, and of course if you are preparing in batch of 1000 components. Now before we proceed for solving this question, let me tell you why this kind of conditions are provided to us. In practical life, when we are dealing in a typical manufacturing setup, there we have to, apart from identifying EBQ, that is economic batch quantity, we have to actually find out the different batches. That suppose if you manufacture in a batch of 10 components, what will be your cost per unit? If you increase your size from 10 to 100, then what will be your cost, and eventually 100 to 1000. So it basically helps the management accountant in finding a comparative view, comparative outlook of which batch manufacturing in which quantum is going to be beneficial for us. So that is basically for decision making. EBQ you have computed, but when it comes to management accountant, they are also interested in knowing that what will be the impact of my total cost per unit manufacturing, total manufacturing cost per unit, or total cost of production per unit if I am going to change the size of my batch. Or you can say we have a question that whether the size of batch is going to have any implication on my total cost or not. So my question in front of you is, or my purpose in front of you is that what should be the impact of changing the size of batches on my total cost? Because eventually or ultimately my ultimate goal is what? To minimize the cost. And if I am able to somehow minimize my cost, my profit is going to be maximized, because that is going to be the overall impact, that I cannot increase the selling price, I can't change the selling price because of intense competition. So what is the way out for increasing my profitability? The way out is we should identify all those points where we can control our cost, where we can minimize our cost. And batch costing is basically offering a solution to us, that if you are manufacturing in different batches, the different batch sizes, which one is going to be more beneficial? That is something which we need to decide. So let us solve this question with this agenda. I am going to prepare a cost sheet for a batch of 10 components first, and then we shall change the batch size and find out the total cost and cost per unit. So let us go ahead. We'll first be taking up the setting up cost. As the question mentions that operator's wages for 2 hours and 20 minutes, the setting up time is 2 hours 20 minutes, and operator's wages was given for 0.72 per hour. So we shall be computing for 2 hours 20 minutes, and the cost of operator's wages comes to be rupees 1.68. So what we have done, we have simply converted our 2 hours 20 minutes in terms of minutes. 1 hour is having 60 minutes. So 2 hours 20 minutes will have how many minutes? 140 minutes. So 120 plus 20, 140 minutes, and the cost of that comes to be 1 rupees and 68 paisa. Then comes overhead of machine, and for that we have 2 hours 20 minutes time, and the rate for this machine per hour is 1.50 per hour, and the amount comes to be 3.50. So if you ask me what is my total setting up cost, it comes to be rupees 5.18. And this is something which is not at all linked with the size of your batch. So regardless of the size of your batch, why I am telling you here only, because when we will be changing the size of batch, then too this setting up cost, total setting up cost shall remain unchanged. The only thing the only change which we are going to witness is what? That will be the cost per unit of this setting up cost, because when you are changing the size of batch, of course the total setting up cost is constant. When we divide it by the increased number of units, this cost is going to be reduced. So 5 rupees and 18 paisa is total setting up cost. We are going to manufacture 10 component in this batch, so it is going to give me a cost of 0.518, or you can say 52 paisa. 0.518 or 0.52 we can write. This is my total setting up cost and cost per unit. Once it is computed, now we shall go for the variable cost, production cost. In variable cost, we have what? We have material, we have operators' wages, and we have machine overheads also. So the cost of material is given that you are having 0.06 or you can say 6 paisa per unit of your production. 10 units we are manufacturing, so the cost comes to be 60 paisa. Operators' wages, it is of course linked with the minutes, the time. So since they are having 10 minutes time for 1 unit and total is 100 minutes, total is 10 components, so 10 into 10, 100 minutes multiplied by 0.72 per hour. So for 60 minutes the cost is 72 paisa. What will be the cost for 100 minutes? And it comes to be 1.20 rupees. The same will follow for the machine overheads also. 100 minutes we are having in hand and 1.50 per hour. So machine overhead is going to be, the total cost should be rupees 2.50. And if we aggregate this entire cost, it comes to be, total cost of production comes to be 4 rupees and 30 paisa. 2.50, 1.20 and 0.80. So this is going to be my total cost, right? Now what we'll do, the 4.30 is total cost of production, and if I have to find out the total production setting up cost, so setting up cost is separate and this total production and total cost of production is separate, we shall aggregate both of them to arrive at total production and setting up cost, which comes to be 9 rupees and 48 paisa, 9.48. And if you divide it by number of units, that is 10 components, it comes to be 0.948, and if we round it off, approximate value comes to be 95 paisa. So what is the outcome of this computation? This cost sheet is giving me an idea that if you manufacture in the batch of 10 components, your cost is going to be 9.48 the total cost, and per unit cost is going to be 0.95, or you can say 95 paisa. Now we shall further proceed. We'll follow the same process for the different batch sizes. So for 10 component we have computed. Now you must be having a question why we went for this kind of segregation where we are having setup cost on one hand and the variable cost on the other. Just to give you an idea that your total setting up cost is going to be constant, it remains constant. The only change which we witness is in terms of cost per unit, because the units are changing, so cost per unit is going to change. But this cost is going to be constant, and you have to add the variable cost into it to arrive at total production and setting up cost. Now we shall proceed for the 100 components. The same process we have to follow for a batch of 100 components, where your total components manufactured in this step will be 100. So we shall now try to understand and witness that what is the impact of this increased batch size on my total cost and cost per unit, so that we can take a final call, we can take a final decision that which batch size is going to be the most beneficial for us and why. The reasons also I shall be telling you after the computation process. So let us have a look at the setting up cost. As I told you, it is going to be constant, that is operators wages. The only point is the operators wages for 2 hours 20 minutes, it is going to be constant. Overhead of machine hours, it is also constant. Total setting up cost is as I told you, it is 5.18. The only difference which we are finding here is that it was earlier 50 paisa, 51 paisa, now it is 5 paisa, because when you are dividing it by 100 components it becomes 0.051. Now coming to the production cost of material, 100 units we are manufacturing, per unit cost is given 100 into 0.06, it gives me a value of 6 rupees. And if you ask me what is my cost per unit, of course it is going to be divided by 100 components, because your total units manufactured is 100 components. Operators wages, now we have to understand that for operators wages it is 1000 minutes, because for 1 unit you are having 10 minutes, so for 100 units what will be your total minutes, that is 1000 minutes. Rate per hour remains constant, that is 0.72 per hour, and if you multiply, the value comes to be 12 rupees. Machine overhead, the same process, you have 1000 minutes, and by machine hour you have to multiply to arrive at the total value of 25 rupees. Now here, my dear learners, the total cost of production comes to be 43 rupees, whereas setting up cost remains constant, that is 5.18. So my total production and setting up cost comes to be 48.18 rupees. And interestingly, when you calculate the cost per unit, it comes to be 48 paisa, which is of course lower than that of the previous batch of 10 components, where we were producing in a batch of 10 component, the cost was on the higher side, and here it comes to be 0.48 rupees. So this is the second comparative analysis, where we are preparing a cost sheet for a batch of 100 components. So as an accountant, we are reporting it to the management that, see, if you manufacture in a batch of 100 components, this will be the scenario. This is going to be your total cost of production and setting up, and this is going to be your cost per unit. Now let's proceed for the third situation, that is when we are going to manufacture in a batch of 1000 components. So now we shall witness what is going to be the impact of this enhanced size from 10 to 100 and then 100 to eventually 1000 component on my total cost. So and not only total cost, my cost per unit, because that is more important for us, that what is my per unit cost if I manufacture in a batch of 1000 component. So let us proceed with that. Setting up cost again remains the same. Total setting up cost, I am not going to repeat it, it is going to be 5.18 rupees total cost, and per unit cost, of course, it is going to be less than that, 0.005 it is going to be. Production cost, here you have cost of material 1000 units into 0.06, 60 rupees. Operators wages, now we have 10,000 minutes. Operator is going to work for 10,000 minutes. The reason is 10 minutes for 1 unit, and you are manufacturing 1000 components, so 1000 into 10, it gives me a value of 10,000 minutes. Now here, my dear learners, it is pertinent to know that operator's wages is basically linked with the time spent by that worker. So the worker is spending 10 minutes on 1 unit or on 1 component, and since they are manufacturing 10,000 components, this is going to be my cost, that is 120 rupees. The same will be impact on machine overheads, and this is going to be my cost, machine overheads allocated one, that is 10,000 minutes at the rate of 1.50 per hour, and this becomes my total cost, that is 250 rupees. Total cost of production comes to be 430 rupees. And total production and setting up cost, when we aggregate both of them, it comes to be 435.18 rupees, and your per unit cost comes to be 43 paisa or roughly 44 paisa, because it is 0.435. So you can say that approximately it is 44 paisa. So my dear learners, in this way we have actually done the calculation for 3 different situations when you are manufacturing in a batch of 10 units, 100 units, and eventually 1000 components. Now we have to make a decision. Before we decide, as a management accountant, see, we have to make a decision, and for that only we are actually doing this entire exercise of computing the cost of manufacturing 1 component by changing your batch sizes. So what is going to be my decision? I have to choose from 3 different situations, and of course I need to give a quantified logic to that if I am selecting the total batch size of say 100 or 1000, what is the reason behind that? So that is more important for us as a student of management accounting, that what benefit, what help we are going to seek from this specific tool of cost accounting for our decision making. So let us have a comparative view of batch units. When you manufacture in a batch of 10 component, the cost is 95 paisa. When you are changing the size from 10 to 100, it becomes 48, and when it becomes 1000 component, the cost comes to be 43 paisa or roughly 44 paisa. So if you ask me what is your decision, needless to say that you will actually go ahead with the third situation. We shall decide, we shall give our decision that the company should manufacture in a batch size of 1000 component, because it is going to make my cost per unit very effective, or it is going to charge me the minimum cost per unit, and that is why we should go for manufacturing in a batch size of 1000 component. So In this way, my dear learners, in practical life also, we take a decision. We have to make a decision, and eventually the top management is going to take decision that what should be the ideal batch size. So batch number, we are looking at a product that is basically, as a customer we are looking at, as an outsider we are looking, but from where that batch size came, what is the logic behind, what is the rationale behind having that manufacturing process into batches. The objective is this only, that we are trying to identify the minimum cost, because that is not only going to save our time but also makes our production cost effective. So this is the way we have to write our decision, that since the total cost per unit of manufacturing these components comes to be 43 paisa, that is minimum when we are manufacturing in a batch size of 1000 component. So we shall go for this situation only. We shall recommend the costing department or the manufacturing department or the factory in charge that you should manufacture in a batch size of 1000 component. So this was the very purpose behind introducing this question to you, that you should know what we are going to do with this kind of comparative analysis. Now we shall move on to another interesting numerical problem, where I shall be letting you know about another way or a different dimension of dealing with the batch costing. There is a factory which has undertaken the supply to supply 200 pieces of a component per month for ensuing 3 months. So there are 3 months for which you have to supply 200 pieces of a component, and every month a batch order is opened against which you are actually charging your materials and labors at actuals. So every month a batch order is opened against which material and labor hours are booked at actuals. Overheads, for that the factory is informing that they are levied at a rate per labor hour. Of course, that is going to be the basis. Selling price as per the contract is 8 rupees per piece, and they are asking us to calculate the cost and profit per piece of each batch order. So here the question is not asking us to identify the profitability of batch size. The dimension of question is different. The dimension of problem is different. Earlier what we were doing, we were trying to identify the most profitable batch size. Here we have to decide the cost and profit per price of each batch order, that what is my total cost and what is the profit for each batch order for 3 months, right? Now details provided to us is for January, February and March, it is batch output which is given in terms of units, material cost it is given in terms of rupee, direct wages, direct labor hours. So direct labor is given in terms of hours, material and wages is given in terms of rupee, and batch output is given in terms of units, that is 210, 200 and 220. Further, the question reports about chargeable expenses. Now this is very important for us as a learner, that chargeable expenses are given to be 12,000, 10,560 and 12,000, and direct labor are given for this is 4,800, 4,400 and 5,000. When we are dealing with such kind of numerical problems in examination, this actually invites a point of mistake. Most of the learners feel that the chargeable expenses are going to be charged from this production process in total, in toto. In totality we cannot charge this. The reason is, at the very outset question said that you have received an order, and for that order every month you will be charging that cost at actuals, and this chargeable expenses are total regardless of that order. So in your manufacturing process, if your labor hour is 4,800, your chargeable expenses are 12,000. If your direct labor hour is 4,400, your chargeable expenses comes down to 10,560, and for 5,000 it remains constant, that is 12,000. So these chargeable expenses are going to be apportioned to your production process in the ratio of, in proportion to the direct labor hours. That is something which we need to understand, and that I will be explaining to you in the working note. So let us start with the working note only. Chargeable expenses, you need to give an assumption here that they shall be charged to different batches based on direct labor hours for different months, and I can show you with an example. For instance, suppose for January chargeable expenses are given to be 12,000, and direct labor hour, as I showed to you, it was for the entire month was 4,800 hours. For 210 units, labor hour is 240, that is reported in the question, that for the month of January you have to produce 210 units and your labor hour consumed is 240. So you have to find out the ratio of chargeable expenses for this 210 units, not for the entire amount of chargeable expenses, which was for 4,800 labor hours. So your total labor hours available with your factory was 4,800 labor hours. So here 4,800 labor hours have expense of 12,000. So 240 labor hours will have how much? So we can find the proportionate value, and it comes to be rupees 600. So my dear learners, in place of allocating the entire chargeable expense to the month of January, we have to identify rationally that what should be my cost, what should be the chargeable expenses if I am only using 240 labor hours for manufacturing these units. So this is more important for you to understand that chargeable expenses are given for the entire factory setup. You have a total labor hour of 4,800. So number of workers who are working in your factory, you have actually multiplied their number with their working hours to identify the total labor hours, and for that you have chargeable expenses. So needless to say that you have to identify what is my effective chargeable expenses if I am using 240 labor hours for this production process, right? So let us solve this question. For 3 months batch output is given in the question. I have simply posted it here: 210 units, 200 units and 220 units. It is simply posted from the question which is given to us. Sales in terms of rupees, selling price was per unit was given. We'll write it here: 1680, 1600 and 1760. I have simply multiplied it with the selling price per unit, which was 8 rupees mentioned in the question. So 200 into 8, 1600, 200 into 210 into 8, 1680, and so on. And then we have material cost 650, 640 and 680 as reported in the question, direct wages from the question only, and chargeable expenses. This is something which I have computed. And that is why we started our solution with the working note, wherein we learned how to calculate these chargeable expenses. For the month of January, I showed you the calculation. The same process we need to follow for the month of February and March, and that comes to be 672 and again 672. And if you aggregate your cost of material, wages and chargeable expenses, your total cost comes to be 1370, 1452 and 1502. If you ask me what is my profit per batch, very simple. Sales minus total cost is going to provide us the profit per batch, because in your practical problem it is reported that you are actually opening the batch from your production process, that is 210 units you are manufacturing in the month of January, because you have received an order to produce in the batch of 210. It is just like a special order, and you are trying to identify what is going to be my total cost if I manufacture in a batch of 210. What if my batch size is changed to 200, and then what if it is going to be 220? And on your screen the profit per batch is available: rupees 310, 148 and 258. So this is going to be my profit per batch: 310 rupees, 148 and 258. Now here question has simply asked us to calculate the total cost and profit per batch. Now coming to the decision making point, what should be my decision? Which one is more profitable? If I ask you that the most profitable one is whether of January or of February or of March, and it is very clear that in the month of January your profit per batch is 310, in February it is 148, and in the month of March 258. So if I ask you which one is more profitable, you can simply calculate it, you can simply identify and write in your report that the most profitable one is going to be my month of January, which is giving me a profit of 310 rupees. So this is going to be the most profitable project for the month of January, wherein you are having a profit per batch of 310. So in a typical question of batch costing, at times we not only ask you to calculate the cost per unit, but we also ask you to calculate the profit per batch. So in this very lecture of mine, I tried to introduce you to two different situations. One was how to identify the impact of change in batch size on your profit. What if I am going to change my batch size? So the impact of that we tried to understand, and we calculated to take a decision, to make a decision that which batch size is going to be most beneficial for the company and why. And here in the second question, what we did, we tried to calculate the cost per unit when your entire production process is going on, you have received a special order for a specific size of batch, and what is that the profit, what is the cost and profit of that manufacturing process when your routine process is going on. So within your routine production process, we try to calculate the profit per batch, and then we can identify in future that whenever you receive an order, it's better to tell the customer that, see, it is 210 units which is going to be beneficial for me. So if somebody is coming and asking you to manufacture for 200 units or placing an order for 200 units, it's better to ask them to revise their order to 210, because that is going to increase your profitability. So with this, my dear learners, I tried to explain to you the different aspects of batch costing. In future lectures of mine, I'll once again come up with some more numerical problems on batch costing. I hope you must have enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.